over the world, because today, ladies and gentlemen, happens to be World Author Day, Authors Day, in fact, and for all of those people who've contributed towards having books or towards writing, I think
Yes.
that all of those people need to be celebrated today. Today is the
Absolutely.
day that we actually remember their services. Today is the day that we call upon them as well. Today is the day that we actually let them know that they have done a wonderful job. So for all of those books which I have written, I think have
You've written?
oh sorry
Read.
I've
Okay.
read.
Okay.
I've never written a book. I
Okay.
do write songs too as well, but for all of those books which I have read, I think that they've had an impact on me, on my personality, and the way I have shaped up. I think that it has done a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
And for all of those people who do not read books, please remember this: readers are leaders. So
Oh,
there's no way other
that's
than this.
what my dad says all the time. Should I tell you what? Whenever I ask him for a suggestion of whatever is going through in my life,
Yeah.
and he'd be like, "Okay, make a decision that you can just do. Sort
Yeah.
of support me or encourage me with things." He's
Yeah.
like, "Make a decision that you will be able to write in your book."
Yeah, and
I'm like,
and
okay, that makes
there was this one book which I love the most. So I think that today I'm actually going to speak about the book I've loved the
Okay.
most
Yes.
reading,
Go on.
and it has had an enormous kind of impact on me and on my personality. So the title of the book is The Art of Thinking Clearly.
Okay.
And it's a very simple book. Once you get into it, you will get to know that in different situations, what are you supposed to do. For example, if I give you a situation
Okay.
that you went to a cinema, you spent $50, you bought your nachos, you went in, you saw the first 15 minutes, and you knew that the film is horrible. What would you do? Would you go back home, or would you sit because of the fact that you spent $50?
I will probably, I don't know, I'd rather go home or sometimes even sleep, because I really don't mind sleeping in a movie or a theater. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's my opinion. But since you've read the book,
Yeah.
how would you manage
Yeah,
this?
so the person says that this is like a kind of false alarm for all those people. It's not like false alarm,
Okay.
but for all those people who tend to sit back and saying that we spent $50 on it,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
now we must consume them. That's not the right way to do it. If you know that the film is not, if you know that it's not a good film, what you need to do is that you really need to get out and get back to work, because in that hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, you might earn $50 back as well.
Right, absolutely. So, ladies and gentlemen, since we are celebrating World Authors Day today, so we have been having two amazingly brilliant authors on our show,
Yep.
on different shows.
Yep.
But today we decided to unite them for this specific show because they are, of course, full of wisdom. They're
Exactly.
so fluently well spoken. They know what they're doing. They have so many books written to themselves as well in their name. MashaAllah. So, without further ado, Shazad.
Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we're very lucky that we've actually been joined by the management director of Tangent, Mr. Faheem Sardar. Assalamu alaikum, sir. How are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Thank you very much for joining us. It's wonderful to have you. Ladies and gentlemen, just a quick bio about Faheem Sardar Saab. He was the youngest CEO ever Pakistan have witnessed, I
Wow.
think so far. He was a CEO at the age of 34. I'm 32 and still nowhere close to be a CEO as well. He's written 3 books so far, and we're actually going to talk about it, how he actually wants to enjoy this day, because this day actually celebrates authors too as well. But thank you very much for joining
Thank
us.
you.
It's wonderful to have
Thank
you.
you.
And alongside Mr. Faheem Sardar, ladies and gentlemen, we've actually been joined by somebody who speaks and writes in 7 languages. Makes me a little jealous,
Yeah, same.
because I kind of try speaking a lot of languages, but all I can speak is hellos and highs. So, yeah, but as a matter of fact, she's written a lot of books, and
7.
those books are actually written in different languages, Turkish, English. That's what it is so far, but we're going to dig in deeper. We're actually going to ask her, how was her journey being an author. Ladies and gentlemen, she's none other than Ms. Tahira Andali. Hello, assalamu alaikum, how are you?
Oh, walaikum assalam, and I am good and proud author.
Thank you very much for joining us, and we're very happy and we're proud of you that you guys are writing books and doing something and adding onto the shelf of book life as well.
Honored.
But so to get started, sir, how would you want to take this opportunity and say that, thank God that there's a day for authors as well?
Okay, thank God there's a day for authors, as we have days for everything, but I think every day should be an author and a reader's day, because really, how can one spend a day not reading or writing?
Yeah.
That's something I find very fascinating, because nowadays the trend has changed. We're so busy with our phones. We think we're reading, we think we're writing. We're doing neither of the two.
Yep.
We're just skimming, and we're just I don't even know if we're speaking properly. So if authors there will always be authors till the end of time. But what do they say? What are they trying to say? What are they trying to reach out to? Why are they trying to reach out? These things are important. In olden days, not so far back actually, I mean even in the 80s you used to have books which used to talk about other books, such as there's a very famous book called The Name of the Rose, in which it's about a very dangerous book that should not be read. Nowadays, you have information floating around. Actually, we're floating around in information, most of which is unnecessary.
Yep.
But I think authors can be important because they sort of put things in a contextual form.
True.
Yep.
In a coded manner, so that when somebody reads it, it should have an effect on them. Because in my opinion, if you read something and it has no effect on you, if you don't learn anything from it, so then in my books, in my eyes, it's not worth it.
All right. What about you, Tahira? How would you love to elaborate upon this opportunity which actually says that there's a day to celebrate people like you?
Well, I have a totally different opinion to sir, because I think that 365 days in a year, so 364 days authors are talking about you people, but among those 365 days there is one day that you people are talking about authors, so that's great, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So because
I
every day
Interesting.
every day they are talking about you, the topics which are taken from their own personal lives, from their experiences. They are trying to connect those things with your life. They try to connect with your emotions, to put that kind of sort of relatedness which you will have to
So that we grasp whatever's
when
being
you
said
read
to
it,
us.
when you read what is written, you think that as you have gone through all this, and as someone has given language to your words, someone is trying to say that what you have to say. So I think that has its own pleasure in writing it and then reading it. So I think one day is everything.
Yeah, and
Yeah, but it's not enough. I understand that, but I feel like both of you sort of made a similar point where people have, of course, certain ideas, but an author puts those ideas into a certain frame, I mean, makes sense of it for all the other laymen like me to understand. And this actually does remind me, because lately I'm studying, I'm reading, otherwise I don't. So I was doing a comparative study of neo-imperial patterns of Israel and India. And I would always ask my teacher, why do they have a free pass to everything? And he's like, what is free pass? This is like, what is this jargon? I don't understand. I was like, I don't know how to explain it, but like they can get away with anything. And then he's like, okay, go work on it, you'll find out a theory. He didn't mention what. So I started studying, and then Carl Schmitt has actually put all of this into this theory of exceptionalism. And I was like, okay, long live authors, because he just solved my problem. I mean, people have ideas, but a certain book can actually change your life, or a piece of art, right? I mean, it's literally art. So yeah, I mean, celebrating you guys today.
yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
At the end of the day, ideas are one of my books, Mind Conquest, is about, it's the power of ideas. That's what it says at the top. But ideas have to be brought into reality.
True.
And I remember, Shahzad, long time back, we had a discussion about bringing ideas into reality.
Exactly.
Anyway, that's a slightly different discussion. But ideas are good. Crazy ideas are also good, because I mean, you have to. It's the crazy ideas that really do something.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, to put it into some kind of a legible form, so that someone can go through it. I mean, Fermat, he just wrote. Fermat's last theorem is based on his a French lawyer having just written at the side of his papers, his legal papers, a cube plus b cube equals to c cube. It's possible. And then you had this army of mathematicians trying to prove it, and it took them maybe, I think, 100 years, more than 100 years to prove it. So had he just given the explanation as well, how you do it, it would have saved a lot of time. But at the end of the day, it was not just an idea. He put it on paper. What I'm trying to say is that in my experience, I've realized that when we say something, I think it has an effect on not only the person listening, but also our environment and our global celestial form.
Exactly.
But when you start writing something, something happens somewhere. It's very strange. I mean, it's very difficult to describe when you write something, and especially when you write with meaning.
Are you
Now,
saying it creates an impact?
Yeah.
it creates, definitely creates an impact, and something happens somewhere in the celestial form. Maybe it won't happen right in front of you to that person. For example, a fantastical description of this is the book, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde.
Okay.
That's a separate story, you know, but it's about how an artist does something very seriously about drawing a person's face and how that face starts to change with time.
All right.
And you know, what is it? They're talking about many things, but one of the things that I'm picking up from that is when you write something and you mean it, something happens somewhere.
Exactly.
And that's one of the importances, one of the, I think, most important things about an author,
Yes.
that they bring about change. There are many books on earth. If you go to the West, if you read them, you will be monitored by FBI
Exactly.
Okay.
just by reading a book.
Okay.
Yeah, we were in a Western country, and when we used to go to the library, we were told, use your card, but do not get that book.
Okay.
All right.
We had instructions, advice, don't get that book. So suddenly you start thinking, what's in that book?
Yeah.
So when somebody writes something, I think it brings about a change, but it also, I'll just share something very strange with you. When I was writing my second book, CEO at 34, I thought I had, you know, done a big thing. I went to the National Library to, as per law, I have to give 2 copies. A gentleman over there just kept staring at me, and he said to me, you wrote this book? I said, yes. And he says, okay, are you going to write more books? And I go, yeah, I have a plan to write so many books if I can. So he said something very strange to me. He said, when you die, all of your things will be either sold off or thrown out. But remember one thing, your books will still be here.
Exactly.
So you tend to leave something that you have observed, understood, for hopefully future generations.
Yes.
Someone will always read it. That's something I
Yes.
know.
Exactly, and I think that this is very wonderfully said, and this is what I actually meant when I said that, you know, it is to increase the shelf life, and you know, for all of that information which is available over the internet might crash. You know, there can be so many different things. Your books are here to stay.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is why there's one more important thing, that whenever I read a book, there's this one thought which comes across my head or my mind, and that is that, you know, the author I'm reading, you know, whatever he's written or she's written, as a matter of fact, it totally depends on his or her surrounding, that the kind of writing I'm actually going to read from that particular author. How do you think that it can be applicable to everybody out there who's reading it?
Are you saying it's contextual?
Yeah, no, the circumstances of any author can be very different. You know,
Alright.
authors can be rich, poor, they might have gone through a severe injury or probably a lot of different hardships in life,
Okay.
and they will write about their own experiences, and the way they write all of those stories, fiction or whatever it is, you can tell that, you know, that the author probably is living a hard life or a very luxurious one. So how does all of that, what a writer writes, imply to each and every one of us, because, or all the readers who are out there?
First of all, it's no hard and fast rule that it should imply or comply or implement to each and everybody
Yep.
body's life living on the planet.
Yep.
A writer might write something which he hasn't experienced in his own life. It might
How can
not
you
be
write
his
about
life.
something which you haven't experienced?
You have observed.
Yeah.
You write on the base of observation. Let me tell you first the definition of author, then you might have the idea that
Yeah.
what I'm talking about, and then you will have the link about it, what I try
Go
to
ahead.
say. The author is a person who invents something, invent the idea, come up with the idea. In the past, you know, the authors were who? They were the people who were just given certain amount to travel, to the tropical areas, to the islands, to the deserts, to the so many places.
Yep.
So to the tropical heavens, what they were getting,
Yeah.
the observations, the style of talking, like the particular area where people are living, the particular civilization, and the way people live their lives, and they come up with the idea.
Exactly.
So they were not worried about like grammatical or other errors, the syntax, or about the the character development. It was the headache of the editor.
Okay.
But nowadays, everyone is author. Writing is everybody is doing. But a writer is someone who does something.
Okay.
What's that something?
That is writing. Writing is something a writer does.
Obviously, that's what you call a
yeah,
writer, right?
but that's different from what other people write. Like, for example, I know writing and I know cooking.
Yeah.
So I can cook, I can write, but am I author? Am I the 3-star chef?
Yeah.
Like that's two different things.
You know, what I'm getting confused in is if, you know, somebody who writes a book is a writer, why is somebody who cooks a chef? He
Yeah,
should
no,
be
they
a
can't.
cooker.
It's total. No.
Yes,
For
please go
example,
on.
Exactly.
like if a person can cook, for example, our mothers,
Yeah.
they cook on daily basis,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
they
yeah.
can't be called, you know, like that
Chef.
that chef,
Yeah,
which,
yeah.
which
Alright.
they are holding
Okay, we
stars
get it,
on
yeah.
their shoulder.
Yep.
So if someone come up with writing nowadays, we see e-books, self-publishing, and blogging, and everybody is a writer. Everybody creates something, but we can't call them authors,
Authors,
because
of
they
course.
are not those who are fitting into this definition
Okay.
of the authors.
All right.
So how, like, coming to your question, that how a person is feeling that link that a writer has established in his book or
Yep.
her book, or everyone has to live. No, we must remember that there is one author above us who has written all our faith, our stories.
Yes.
So we have to live in that, and we are assigned with the role of authors, and you are assigned with the roles of readers.
Yeah.
So you are reading what I have written, but it's not necessary that I have lived that sort of life. For example, I write about the agonies. So
Okay.
I haven't gone through, you know, any of these agonies,
But you have observed.
or that betrayals, or that, yeah, but I have observed around me, in my surroundings. There are, for example, if my poems, if I recite here, of course, what you are trying to say is that the words which say something about specific culture, my culture, you cannot find it with, you know, here. If
Okay.
writers talk about, you know, if I'm talking with some author, you know, and we are discussing our ideas, my idea is different because my placement, my brought up is different,
Yeah.
Okay.
in separate environment.
Yeah, that's what I said.
So that's, yeah, so that's not necessary. Okay, in that area, might someone get linked to that I have lived that life, you know, or I'm going through that. So writer is talking about me,
Exactly.
but it's not necessary or written anywhere that a person should live or a person should live to everybody's experiences.
Okay.
Like that.
All right, that does make sense, of
Yeah.
course. But because they are qualified writers, when you say authors we're talking about, so of
Yeah.
course, I mean, they do have a certain sort of perspective or knowledge that is applicable or understandable by everyone. But here's the thing, I don't even know if I should be talking about this, but I feel like you guys can answer this really
Go
well.
ahead.
There are some pieces of literature which are, I think you also mentioned this, banned for public, not openly available to everyone out there. And just an example
Good
out there,
point.
let's see, books about psychedelics, for example. I mean, there is a theory Trench McKenna put out and everything. Not everyone is allowed to access that, I mean, through so many different forms. This was just an example. Is this, do you feel like a violation of right of freedom of expression or writing, or do you feel like if you know, this piece of art has been put out, this piece of writing has been put out after so much research and knowledge and whatnot, should this not be available to human beings, I mean, to understand and
For
study?
everybody.
Or is this a right practice? Should it be
Yeah,
banned?
we'll start with you, Mr.
Yeah.
Fee.
Look, there's a, I think there's American law, there was a legislation which was passed, and I'll just go in reverse actually, which is your freedom ends at the tip of your nose.
Okay.
And that's it, you
Yeah.
know. So if there is material on earth which is offensive
Okay.
to some people, it will not be offensive to other people,
Yeah.
because they come from, as our colleague very rightly said, that
Different backgrounds.
exactly. But what we have to understand is something that is important. There is a book, for example, I will not discuss it right now. People don't talk about it. A, they don't read it. They haven't read it. I have. Many people have in Pakistan, but you know, the majority has not.
All right.
But they don't even know about it, and at the same time, when you bring it up, they don't have the background to understand the importance of that book. That book is, by the way, more or less banned in the West.
Okay.
So here I'm taking a reverse example, because there must be some information in it. that's useful.
Of course, there is. So my point of understanding, when I was speaking specifically about those books that I feel like if there is certainly a kind of information that has been proven, that is going to be helpful to the humankind as well. I just feel like this might be conspiracy theory. You're containing all that knowledge from the public. Why shouldn't everyone have access
You
to it?
might not be ready
No,
for it.
I'm
you know.
just saying.
I just want to say one thing
Yeah,
here.
please.
Look, every society at every stage has a control mechanism.
Yes.
Every society, come what may, you cannot just allow things to go left, right, center, up
Yep.
or down whenever
Okay.
they feel like. This notion of freedom does not exist, especially in the West where this idea comes from.
Okay.
It does not exist. You are not free. In Russia, you could travel with one document. In America, you need 3 documents. If you're missing any one of them, you'll go to jail. People don't really analyze these things.
Right.
So what we need to understand is, what is this so-called freedom? I'm not trying to destroy the question. I'm just saying this is the reality of the situation.
please go on.
What does freedom actually mean? We in Pakistan are quite free, actually. You can
Yes,
do whatever
agreed.
you want. You can say whatever you want. There's just 4 or 5 things. I keep telling foreigners there are 5 things in Pakistan. Just don't cross them. Do whatever you want after
Yeah.
that. So we have our control mechanism. They have their control mechanisms. You have to be able to bridge this gap. And the East is East and the West is West, and never the twain shall meet. This is actually true. It's not
This is true,
untrue.
absolutely.
So staying within that confine, I at least would feel, and I'm sure our colleague will add more, you have to draw a line. What is knowledge? What is offensive?
Yep.
What is genuinely, inadvertently offensive? What is actually offensive? And I'll give you 2 examples.
Outright.
The first, this book that I just mentioned, is inadvertently offensive to some people, but it is extremely accurate.
Yeah.
And conversely, there was another book I read, I won't take its name.
Yeah.
It's banned in Pakistan.
Okay.
I read it, and it was overtly offensive to us.
Okay.
So there's a difference.
To Pakistanis, you're saying?
To Muslims.
Oh, Muslims. Okay.
So
Exactly.
there's a difference. So we have to draw a line, have to draw a balance, and this notion of so-called freedom, this doesn't exist.
And thank you very much
No
for
matter how
mentioning
much
that
we
as well.
advocate it for.
And ladies and gentlemen, speaking of offensive writing, I think we cannot forget Manto Saab as well, because Manto Saab's writings were always very offensive, and he had multiple issues with the society. But then at the same time, what Faheem Sardar Sahab said, that whatever he said or whatever he wrote was accurate, and there was no second thought about it. But then at the same time, since we're running short of time, we have last 2-3 minutes. There's one more thing which I wanted to ask, that, and it's a pledge that I want all authors out there to actually be non-biased or unbiased as well. We have seen that there are a lot of people who actually write because they have some hidden agendas behind that as well, and that stroke of pen can do wonders. Where Faheem Sardar Sahab even said that, once you've written something, it's going to have an impact somewhere in the world. How do you think that we can actually convince or convey this message to all of those people who write, or probably change minds of other people, millions of people, to do it in the best of interest of society?
Basically, the idea of that changing someone's life. So yeah, every book can do that. My inspiration was Chicken Soup for Soul. It's not even fiction.
Okay.
It's not even non-fiction. It's not even something very extraordinary. But it's something very ordinary, some small fragments of stories from daily lives of people, written by people.
Yes.
Like whatever, they were not authors, they were not that specific authors or celebrated writers. They were not Agatha Christie or J.K. Rowling or Saadat Hasan Manto or not Faiz,
Yeah.
but they wrote what their heart said.
Yeah.
And adding to Sir's point that how it should be, freedom of expression or freedom to write what you feel. My point is, write with conviction. Okay, that's from an author's point of view. But
Okay.
what a person should read, being a reader, what is controversial for you? For example, if I am a Jew, I will not have to read about Holocaust.
Yeah.
That would be controversial for us, even if it is accurate. So there is this 3 things in reading: treasure, trash, and pleasure.
Yeah.
So you have to pick what you are reading for. for
Yeah.
accuracy, for data collection, or for your knowledge. If
Exactly.
you want to gain knowledge, okay, go for it. But if you are like, but let me give you one
Wait,
interesting
you
thing.
you can
Hold
definitely
that
give us an
thought.
example. Hold
Yes.
that
Yeah.
thought. We're actually going to come back to you, ladies and gentlemen. We've actually got a small package to share with you guys. Go ahead, take a look at this, and when you guys will come back, we're actually, going to listen to Miss Sandleep over here, what she's actually trying to convey. Let's do that. Good morning.
Authors, as we all know, are writers capable of uniquely drafting fictions, biographies, non-fictions, motivationals, poems, and even plays which are enticing to a class of readers. William Shakespeare is an English playwright, poet, and actor born in April 1564. He was the best author and poet of his time and is regarded as the best writer in all of time. Some of his bestsellers include Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, and The Tempest. Stephen Edwin King, born 1947, is an American author of contemporary horror, supernatural fiction, suspense, science fiction, and fantasy. His books have sold more than 350 million copies, many of which have been adapted into feature films, miniseries, television shows, and comic books. John Ronald Reuel Tolkien was an English writer, poet, philologist, and university professor who is best known as the author of the classic high fantasy works The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and The Silmarillion. Charles John Huffam Dickens was an English writer and social critic. He created some of the world's best-known fictional characters and is regarded as the greatest novelist of the Victorian era. J.K. Rowling and Robert Galbraith is a British novelist, screenwriter, and film producer, best known as the author of the Harry Potter fantasy series. The books have gained worldwide attention, won multiple awards, and sold more than 400 million copies. Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky, sometimes transliterated Dostoevsky, was a Russian novelist, short story writer, essayist, journalist, and philosopher. Dostoevsky's literary works explore human psychology in the troubled political, social, and spiritual atmosphere of 19th century Russia and engage with a variety of philosophical and religious themes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this was a very informative small report about today's International World Authors Day. And before we went out on this, Shahzad had actually thrown a question to Ms. Tahira over here, and she had a very good explanation to it. Please carry on.
Actually, I was saying that if a book is tagged with a controversy, that's read widely, more than a book which is lying in a shelf to wait for the reader.
The forbidden fruit.
Yeah, the example I was quoting is the book of the biography of Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf in German. So My Struggle in English. So being a translator, if when I came to know that actually the chapters about Jews has been reduced from it or deleted from it, it was very astonishing for me, and I had this urge to read it more than before. If like I would not care for Adolf Hitler in my rest of the days. But when I heard that okay, they have deleted it actually based on this biasness and everything, then I got that I have to read it. So people like me that who hear about being an author, I would say that if a book is being tagged with controversy, I think it should be read
Open.
open.
And I think it's human nature as well. And ladies and
Curiosity
gentlemen,
does
we
fill a
can
gap.
definitely give a million of examples, but two of the examples which I can remember since I'm doing a sports show as well. So one of the books which was written by Shoaib Akhtar was a huge controversy.
Alright.
And then later on, Mr. Shahid Afridi wrote a book that was a huge controversy as well. So I think it's similar to like baiting, the way people actually use the taglines so that you click on them, and it's human nature, so it will work. But very quickly, your messages for all the authors who are out there, please go ahead, anything you have to say, and readers as well.
Keep at it and make a positive change, because authors can create a lot of havoc.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Of course,
Exactly.
because the power of words is actually a power that we sometimes underestimate, let's say. Yeah. So what about you?
For authors, I have message that keep writing what you are writing. Do not fit in with that like ideas of others that what you should write.
Yeah.
You should write what you want to read. You want to read yourself. that would be, you know, interesting thing to do, and write with conviction, but just keep in mind that it should not cross the limits for some people who just you know, feel like affiliation for your name, like some people like to read the names of the author and then they pick a book.
Yeah.
So do not disappoint them, and do not speak about someone's religion, someone's personal differences and cultural differences, linguistic differences. Like, do not mock them. Do what you are doing in a positive way, but you might have a definition of positivity to your own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the
Understand,
readers, read everything what you can read in this lifetime, because people like our ancestors, being a Muslim, our ancestors have written books which even cannot read in our whole life. So they have written that amount, that quantity of books. So keep reading, because reading will lead you to, you know, expand your vision, and by reading you will just get to know yourself, because reading is knowing.
Exactly.
And writing is you know, writing is most torturous job. Being an author, I say,
Yeah.
yeah. For a writer, it's always that, you know, he don't want to write. If it's imposed on him, it's always that certain you know, amount of time that has been granted by divine to write. You know, I'm talking about the creative writing, not for the analytical or you know, statistical writing.
Of course.
So my message to all the readers is that keep supporting the positive things you are getting from the readers, and keep supporting us, and please read my books.
Well, that's great.
amazing.
Thank you very much for joining us. But one last thing, very quickly. So for all the shows we do, you know, it is very hard for me and Shiza to watch them in repeat, you know, and it's just because of the fact that we're in it and we know what we have done.
Yeah, it's
So
cringe.
for all the authors who are out there, or writers who write books, do you think they read them first or they do not?
I think
Yes or no?
And for example, I will give you the answer this very honestly. We do read, but we don't want to change anything in it. Like, if someone suggests, I would hate that idea that come on, like, I have read it, and I have, like,
No,
I
but
have
do you read the book you've written yourself?
Of
I-
course.
After
Yes,
you've
I
written
have
it?
to.
course.
I have to,
Okay.
because we love our creations.
Well, that's great.
And they are like our children.
Yeah.
So I love, but sometimes a mother like a child, but people might not think that he or she is beautiful.
Yeah.
So you know, some authors think that their books are the, you know,
Best.
beautifully and wonderfully written, but the
Others might not think that.
masses may not appreciate it and celebrate it.
But it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter for the author. Being an author, I
Yeah.
would just don't care, but I would love to read and read my books, but I would hate the idea to change anything in it.
And it's cool that
right.
you're carefree. That's a lot to learn from, ladies and gentlemen. And what about you, Mr. Faheem Sardar?
I do read my books, but I'm extremely critical of myself.
Okay.
So I'm like, I would read it to criticize.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that might take you for like a very long time for a person who might avoid rereading his work or taking another look at it. I mean, being self-critical is actually
That's my take on it. And something strange has happened in the past 1 year, that I've had to refer to my books
Yeah.
for reference.
Okay.
Because what did I write? Because at the time you're researching things, and then you write it down, and then you forget about it, you move on.
Yeah.
But I personally would like to read my book to criticize it.
Wow.
Wow,
That's
that's
great.
amazing.
Thank you very much for being with us. It was lovely to have you. And for everybody
you.
who's out there, ladies and gentlemen, we're very short of time. So please make sure that you write to us on our Facebook page, which is with the name of,
Well This Morning.
on Twitter,
Well This Morning without a G.
on Daily Motion and
Also
YouTube.
World This Morning.
And the fabulous repeat is going to be at
11 p.m. tonight.
till the next time. 1, 2, 3. Good morning.
Read books.